doing that. I hope to have the videos up, edited and up late next week. And then I'll provide links to everybody in case you want to use it for any reason.
Yeah.
And we'll probably keep it sort of, we'll keep it close to the front, and then probably by the fall we'll have it archived where people can still get to it. Yeah. I don't know if that's of any interest or use to you, but just to let you know.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I think there is a great interest in this topic, and I can also share with people in the UK who are interested in this or who would love to find out more about the Jewish soldiers of the Central Powers. So are we waiting a little longer, or should I start the presentation?
Well, I would, because of our time, if you're okay with it, I would go ahead and get started. There may be some people that show up, but I mean, they won't interrupt in any way. Let me fix the camera or the light.
Yeah.
There we go. That's much better. All right. So yeah, if you want to go ahead and get started, if it's all right, I was going to go ahead and read what we have here for your background.
Yeah. 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 I think I will start with a short introduction, and then I start getting into the details. Is that fine?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
All right, and I'm starting. Well, hello everyone, and thank you for attending this program. Certainly, we will have a very interesting topic today about the Jewish soldiers of the Central Powers in the World War I. Central Powers were Germany and Austro-Hungary, and we will find out the later fate of these Jewish war veterans in the Second World War and in the Holocaust. So I will just quickly introduce myself. My name is Peter Rosenbluth. I am a documentary filmmaker, and I also work in the procurement. Apart from that, in the UK, I was born in Hungary into a Jewish family, that was very pro-Hungarian, very patriotic Hungarian, and they took part in the Hungarian War of Independence already in 1848, and they took part in the Great War from the beginning, from 1914 till the end. And it was a tragic betrayal of our family what happened later in European history, how we were betrayed by our own home countries, and how World War I veterans, including my great-grandfather, was deported to concentration camp. So yeah, we will be speaking about this very dramatic and also very interesting subject today. I made a presentation. We're also making a documentary movie of this, a colorized documentary movie with a childhood friend, who's also Peter Banyuari, and this will be the first movie actually on the Jews and the World War I, and the second movie in the world which has been properly colorized. So I'm just going to share my screen and start the presentation. Just a second. Oops, where is it? Here we go. So I believe everyone can see the screen now. So in order to understand the position and the historical background of the Jewish soldiers in the World War I German and Austro-Hungarian army, we have to go back a little bit in history and see what the 19th century and early century looked like from the Jewish point of view. So after centuries of oppression and persecution, the 19th century, the mid-19th century, the late 19th century in Europe brought a change for the Jews, a change and the number of reforms that the Jews would be finally equal citizens of their countries. For example, in Austro-Hungary, the Jews were emancipated in 1868, and in very militarized states like Prussia, just before the unified Germany was born, the best way for a Jew to prove his national allegiance, his commitment to the fatherland, was through military service. We know that anti-Semites, even to this day, are accusing the Jews that they are not serving in the military, or if they do, they are not in fighting positions. And we can imagine that in a very military society, how Prussia was, what was the position of the Jews there. So in order to do that, they had to be present in the military, and thousands of Jews joined the military already during the Franco-Prussian War, which was in 1870. We are speaking about a population of Jews of 500,000 or something like that in this era. And on the left side, we can see Jewish soldiers of the Prussian army celebrating Yom Kippur in 1870. We can see this is a contemporary postcard, and we can see there are probably thousands there, which is really indicating a massive contribution of the Jews already in the 1870s. And when the 20th century was approaching, the Jews were really optimistic about it. They thought that this will be the century that will bring the final changes, which will erase anti-Semitism from modern Europe. And when the World War I broke out, most of the Jews considered it an opportunity to show their loyalty and their commitment to their countries. On the right side, we are seeing a German Jewish soldier. The picture was given to me for the documentary project by the Jewish Museum in Berlin. And we can also see here a patriotic, a proud Jewish soldier here of the German infantry. So the World War I breaks out. So let's speak about what was the position of the Jewish soldiers in the Central Powers armies. In the German army, there were approximately 100,000 Jewish soldiers. They were Israelites. They were identified by the religious affiliation. And there were another 20,000 soldiers who were of Jewish origin. By Jewish origin, I mean that they were born Jews, but they were brought up as Christian because of the assimilation that was happening in Europe at that time, or they had a Jewish parent or Jewish grandparent. This detail is important because the Nazis persecuted the Jews from a racial point of view. So when the Nazis grabbed the power in 1933, they persecuted everyone who had a Jewish grandparent, and the Nuremberg laws, the racial laws, all applied to these soldiers. In the Austro-Hungarian army, there were about 320,000 Jewish soldiers, a very, very huge number, and another 100,000 of soldiers who had Jewish ancestry with the same methodology which I just discussed. And about 40,000 of them were killed in action. And in the German army, about 12,000 were killed in action and tens of thousands were wounded. This is a very strong fact. And in comparison, about 25,000 Jewish soldiers died in all of the Israeli wars in the history since Israel was established in 1948. So more Jews died for Germany and then for Austria-Hungary than Jews for Israel. It is crazy. So you can just imagine what these soldiers felt when the Nazis started to persecute them, and when their former comrades and when the German society turned against them. In this picture, we can see a Hanukkah celebration from 1916 from the Eastern Front. And we are still seeing proud German soldiers, proud and happy Jewish soldiers who are wearing their Iron Cross ribbons, who are holding the Hanukkah, and it's visible that there is fraternity and still a very good atmosphere. So it is still really hard to understand what did happen. How could the German society turn against these people when they were sharing the trenches in the Great War in really severe conditions? The Austro-Hungarian army, from the Jewish point of view, was a bit different from the German. First of all, there was bigger religious tolerance. They provided, there were kosher field kitchens, which provided the Jews with kosher food. And the Jewish loyalty was not really questioned. The Jews were joining the Austro-Hungarian army in the same way like they did in Germany. They were volunteering, but they had different reasons as well to fight the Russians. At that time, there were multiple programs in Russia, which was now enemy of the Central Powers. So the Jewish loyalty was not really questioned in the Austro-Hungarian army, unlike in Germany in 1916, which started with the Judenzahlung, or in English, it's called the Jewish Census. It started in 1916 when the Germans realized that their plans are not going as well as they planned, and that they were not really winning the Great War. And this Jewish census meant that they wanted to monitor the performance of the Jewish soldiers, and they wanted to find out if there are enough Jewish soldiers compared to the Jewish population of Germany. And even if there are enough Jewish soldiers, are they fighting on the front line, or are they in the supply chain? Are they on back the front lines and etc. And what's very interesting is that the results were never published. And the reason why the results were never published is because the conclusion was exactly the opposite what the Germans expected. So they found that the Jews are serving in well enough numbers compared to the population. And they also found out that thousands of them were awarded the prestigious Iron Cross already by 1916, which was a very high military award in Germany. But of course, this census was highly offensive. It offended Jewish soldiers who were already fighting for 2 years in trenches, and it damaged the comradeship between the soldiers. It was really demotivating for the Jews that the Germans conducted such census against them, and to some extent it did the damage. But as the war raged on, and as they stopped and did not publish the result of the census, still there was a strong comradeship between German Christians and the German Jews. In this photo, we can see Austro-Hungarian rabbis, military chaplains, who not only comforted the Jewish troops, and they also supported and provided religious comfort to Christian soldiers when there was a need for it. And they also created a prayer book for the soldiers, which I'm holding in my hand. Now, I believe that I'm just showing the presentation, but I'm definitely going to show a Jewish prayer book from the Great War from 1915, which was edited by Rabbi Ernst Deutsch, Frankfurter, and Rudolf Werder. And we can also see again that how proudly the field rabbi is wearing his military medals, and we see very committed Jewish officers here. A military chaplain, by the way, was equal to a captain in the Austro-Hungarian army. This is another photo that really shows the fraternity of the Great War. You can see a Christian military chaplain, a Muslim imam, and a Jewish rabbi. This is one of my favorite pictures, actually, because it just really shows. It just shows everything, and it's really dramatic. When I look at this photo, and later I look at photos of Holocaust victims and humiliated World War I Jewish veterans, I just ask, how could this happen? But we will try to find an answer in this presentation. And another interesting photo on the right side is seeing Jewish officers of the Austro-Hungarian army in Jerusalem at the Kotel. This is an interesting one as well. So there were lots of Jews who volunteered to train the Ottoman Turks in Jerusalem and to train their artillery, because they simply wanted to go to Jerusalem, as it's the holy city in Judaism. And the Austrians fear that it will boost the Zionist morale, and it may backfire on them, and the Jewish soldiers wouldn't want to go back to the European theater of the war. So they started to limit the number of the Jews who they sent to the Middle East. They were also worried if they will settle down, and certainly many Jewish soldiers who were there settled down, and a number of them were also killed in the Great War. So I mentioned about there were different motivations of German Jews and Austro-Hungarian Jews in the World War I. I decided to pick up this photo because, so on the right side, we can see a German Jew wearing the Iron Cross ribbon. And on the left, you can see Josephus Flavius, a general and the military genius of the Jewish-Roman wars in the first century, who also was a historian of the age. This Jewish soldier from the Great War just reminded me of him, of the ancient Israelites. And that's how they were actually referring themselves. German Jews and Austro-Hungarian Jews wanted to show that they are as fierce warriors as the ancient Israelites were, just like the ones who fought against the Romans and the ones who fought against the Greeks, the Maccabees. Many times I came across newspapers when they refer to themselves as Maccabees or as Judean rebels. And certainly this photo is a proof. The German Jews fought to show their commitment and patriotism, while Austro-Hungarian Jews had special reasons to fight the Russians. Many of the Jews from the Austro-Hungarian army came from Russia and from Galician Russia, where there were a number of pogroms and oppressions, or the Odessa pogrom, for example. And these were very brutal. Even Gentile soldiers of the Austro-Hungarian army wrote that the Jews in Russia are treated with medieval barbarism. I read it in the accounts of prisoners of war who were transported to Russia, and those Jews who escaped from the pogroms and their children who grew up by this time, they wanted to take the revenge. And this is going to be very interesting because, like I said, the Jewish loyalty in the Austro-Hungarian Empire was not really questioned in the beginning. What was questioned is if the Jews can be good soldiers, actually. And Archduke Joseph of Austria in 1914 was talking really negatively of the Jewish troops. There was a regiment, the 85th Infantry Regiment from Satmar. Satmar had very big Jewish population, and certainly the 85th Regiment equally had a very high number of Jewish soldiers. And the Archduke was speaking in a derogative manner that they would be covered, they are not going to fight against the Russians, they will run away, they will surrender. And exactly the opposite happened. They fought very well. And the Archduke himself later published and gave a statement how wrong he was about the Jewish soldiers and how bravely they fought. And on multiple occasions, the Jewish soldiers fought braver than the Gentiles. And of course, you know, when you are accused of something, when they think you are covered, you want to show that you are not. And when I was researching for the documentary film, I came across a number of regimental books. Regimental books were written by the officers and soldiers and were published after the Great War. Basically, the history of the regiment, history of the battles, and heroic acts were written down. And on multiple occasions, I read that Jews volunteered for risky combat missions, and many of them unfortunately died simply because they wanted to fight the stereotypes. They wanted to show that they are good, loyal, and brave soldiers. And perhaps one of the best examples of this is the story of Mór Boros on the right side. He was an Austro-Hungarian Jew. As you can see, he has got plenty of military medals. He was a captain, he was an officer, and in the civilian life, he was a teacher. So perhaps really he was the perfect example of what a patriot was in the 20th century. Any country would be proud of him. He was awarded the Medal of Bravery, one of the highest military medal in Austria-Hungary. It's kind of equal to the Silver Star in America. And he was also awarded the Signum Laudis, which is it's like the Medal of Honor in the US. And he was wounded in action. He was also a volunteer, and he was taken prisoner, and he survived the really hostile conditions in Siberia. And even there, he did not join the communists, because the communists tried to drag him to the party because he was educated, and they needed educated people. But instead of that, he started a military comedy show to entertain the fellow prisoners, to keep the spirit high, to keep the morale high. And what happened to him later is tragic. He was killed in Auschwitz in 1944. And every time I come across his story, I'm deeply shocked. Just look at him, and he had such a tragic death. So first, he was deprived of his rights, and then he was arrested by the Hungarian gendarmerie, special police force in Hungary that was deporting the Jews, and then killed in Auschwitz. Can you just imagine how much he suffered, and how tens of thousands of Jewish veterans who were still alive during the World War II, how they suffered? And only a few of them survived this hate. But let's stay a little bit at the World War I to learn a few more examples about the German army and the Austro-Hungarian army. In the German army, there were about 3,000 Jewish soldiers who were promoted to the rank of officers. It was still dominated by Prussian standards, and there was strong anti-Semitism in many Prussian officers. And if a Jew did not get recommendation from all of the officers, he just could not become an officer. It was exactly the opposite in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, where they admitted and they needed the talents and the skills of educated Jewish troops. So there were much more, about 18% who were Jewish officers. And we'll tell another interesting story in a minute. The other difference between the two armies was that there were actually much more Jews in the Air Force in the German Empire than in the Austro-Hungarian. And certainly, many of them became flying aces. On the left side, we see Wilhelm Frankel, who earned 20 aerial victories. He actually converted later to Christianity, became a Catholic in order to marry a Christian woman. And Frankel was killed in action in 1917. And on the right side, we see Fritz Beckhardt, another flying ace. He survived the Great War, and he survived the Second World War II in concentration camp. And this is really tragic because he just could not imagine how his former comrades would let this happen. He, for example, personally knew Hermann Göring from the World War I. And despite initial promises that he and his family and other veterans would be spared, he was also sent to concentration camp. But fortunately, he was one of the few who survived. In this picture, we can see Willy Rosenstein, another decorated German Jewish pilot. And this is his fighter airplane. His comrade was actually a German, a non-Jew. And you can see the Star of David on the airplane, which is quite significant. Definitely portrays that he was that he was really proud to be a Jew. But what is interesting that this was painted on the airplane after 1916 by his non-Jewish comrade, because he was also upset at the Judensammlung, at the Jewish Census. Like I said, when they started to monitor and the performance of Jewish soldiers, it really made his comrade upset, and he stood up and he decided that he will paint the Star of David. And they were actually a very well-known a couple in the Air Force. Even the Red Baron know him, and Göring also know both of them. As the Germans were losing the Great War, they just could not accept the defeat, and this is where still many historians debate how they could betray their Jewish comrades later. The Germans were a very militarized nation, and they were used to winning wars, and they had great conquerors and conquerors in history. They just could not accept being defeated, so they had to come up with a reason, and they had to find scapegoats, and they created a legend, a myth that Germany was stabbed in the back by the Jews. So this theory said that the German army was undefeated on the front line, but they lost the war inside Germany because of the Jews. This is an entire nonsense, and it just does not make sense, because here is a very interesting story that has been left out of most history books and World War I books as well. The Jewish Distribution Committee's mission to Siberia. So in 1919, there were still tens of thousands of German and Austro-Hungarian prisoners of war who were held in Russia, Siberia, in really harsh conditions. And it was expected that if no one helps these soldiers, they can freeze to death, they can die. And there was a mission to save the Jewish soldiers, but like I said, the comradeship in this area was still very strong. So in partnership with the Red Cross, the American Jews, many of them, by the way, German Jews or Russian Jewish refugees who know about the harsh conditions in Russia, they decided to save prisoners of war. So say they saved 7,000 Jewish soldiers and brought them back from Siberia, but they also saved thousands of Gentile soldiers from Jewish donations, from Jewish money, and by Jewish diplomatic efforts. So how could the Jews stab Germany in the back if even after the World War I, they were looking after the Gentile soldiers of the Central Powers? And here is a postcard, by the way, which the JDC archives made available, an amazing resource for research of a Hungarian Jewish soldier who was born in 1888, and he was brought back from Siberia. And till this point, the Jews were still feeling patriotic, and despite that, they went through a number of accusations, like the Jewish Census, and only a few of them asked to be repatriated to Jerusalem or to early kibbutz villages, and like 95% of them went back to their home countries, to Germany and to Austria-Hungary. But this humanitarian mission carried out by Jews says a lot. There is a very interesting story which truly touched me when I started to work on Jewish documentary films, and it was the story of Richard Stern. Richard Stern was a typical German Jew. His family was a patriotic, quite secular German Jewish family, and his brother was one of the first of the volunteers who joined the German army when the Kaiser Wilhelm, the German emperor, made a speech how the Jews and Gentiles are equal and how they should defend Germany together. So his brother, Heinrich Stern, was one of the first of the volunteers in 1914. Richard joined the war later because he was simply just too young in the beginning. He joined the army in 1917. He was mobilized already. That was a totally different era of the German army, as they were losing the war. But it did not deter him, and he wanted to do his duty for his country. And he was barely 18 years old when he was awarded the Iron Cross. And he was a machine gunner, and I was fortunate to know his great nephew, actually his grandson, because he did not marry, but he raised his great nephew as a grandpa. And that person is Rabbi W. Jack Romberg, who just wrote a book on Richard Stern, and which I will show after the presentation. So he got the Iron Cross, but that's not the reason why he became so famous. The thing is, when the Nazis in 1933 started to boycott the Jewish shops, he just couldn't stay silent. As a former World War I veteran who was on the front line, who served, who had the Iron Cross, he just couldn't stay silent. And he was giving anti-Nazi pamphlets to passersby in front of his shop in Cologne. And he was actually the only Jew in Cologne to demonstrate against the Nazis. And this moment, this iconic moment, was photographed. We can see him. Obviously he's already older here, but he's wearing his Iron Cross. He is a proud Jew, even when the Nazis come and spread false rumors and accuse the Jews. He stands firm in front of his shop, and the young essay talk, he visibly looks like morally defeated. He seems to be confused, he seems to be nervous, and the body language is telling the whole story. A scrawny Nazi who probably, well, this guy is definitely too young that he would have been in World War I. And probably he's in the essay because he was just unfit for military service. And on the right side, we see this Jewish veteran who has nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, he can be proud of everything. And this is why Jewish war veterans were actually a huge danger for the Nazis. And you would ask, how could the Nazis do it? But that's not how the Nazis were thinking. The Nazis who wanted to secure absolute dictatorship and wanted to control the German public. In 1933, it was not that, it was not the same like in 1944. The German society still had some kind of respect for Jewish war veterans. And because of that, the Jewish war veterans were contradicting the false stereotypes that the Nazis were spreading about them. The Nazis were spreading rumors how the Jews avoided the service in the World War I, and that the Jews were inferior, they were physically weak, fat, disabled people. And then, of course, you are seeing people on the streets of Germany like Richard Stern, strong, proudly wearing military medals from the Great War. So this is why it was very difficult for the Nazis to deal with the Jewish war veterans, because many of the Jewish war veterans put their military medals to their shops, and they were wearing it in public. And of course, there were still many Gentile German Jews who served in the World War I, and they know that, yeah, the Jews fought just as any other German soldier. So because of this, they posed a danger to the Nazi propaganda. So they had to be oppressed. Initially, the German war veterans were spared from the persecutions, but later they were also sent to concentration camps and ultimately to Auschwitz, where most of them died. But also in the beginning, when some of the anti-Jewish laws did not apply to them, I just asked myself that if the Nazis destroy and deprive my family of their rights, and what's my freedom worth? What would I do without my loved ones? So I think it was even a bigger humiliation, and the Nazis just had this in the beginning, because they were worried that what if the German society would stand up against them and protect the Jews. There are a number of fascinating facts. For example, Hitler's commander, Hugo Gutmann, was a Jew. And Gutmann was actually Hitler's direct superior who recommended him for the Iron Cross. Not a lot has been unearthed on this, because as Michael Geheran writes in his book, Comrades Betrayed, a great historian as well, Hitler was known as a rear area pig by ordinary German soldiers. And the circumstances of the Iron Cross decoration are quite controversial. It's likely Gutmann wanted to help Hitler. He knew that how the medal was important for him. Most likely that's why he helped him getting the Iron Cross. By the way, Gutmann himself was recipient of the Iron Cross, and he was harassed by the Gestapo and by the Nazis. But when they found out that he was the commander of Hitler, then they allowed him to leave. So he immigrated to the US on time. Most likely, Hitler was worried, because if Hitler showed to the German public that is this how he treats his previous commander, he would have lost lots of support, that's for sure, especially in the 1930s, when the Nazis were not controlling as much as they did in the 1940s. So this is why they spared Gutmann, not because of any good gesture. But there was another Jewish commander in Hitler's unit, the company commander Amstas. This officer was actually he actually was one of the 20,000 Jews who I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. He was born to Jewish parents, but he was baptized and he was brought up as a Christian, so he did not know much about Judaism. Despite that, he was considered a full-blooded Jew by the Nazis. He went across the same persecutions and humiliation like Gutmann. For the same reasons, his life was spared. Now, he was also recipient of the Bavarian Military Order of Merit, a really, really high decoration. And what is interesting about him as well, that when they asked about Hitler, he actually did not know that Hitler was with them. He said, what, Hitler? He was in a unit? We never even noticed him. And this also proves that the Iron Cross Hitler received on Gutmann's recommendation was most likely just Gutmann's goodwill gesture. As we enter the 1940s, the fate of the World War I veterans become more gloomy and dark, and they are being sent to Theresienstadt concentration camp, which initially was promised to be a ghetto where the Jews can have a good life, where veterans will have an access to normal life. But what happened there was exactly the opposite. They were subject to abuse, they were subject to beatings, they were humiliated, they were starved, and the conditions for war invalids were even harsher because they were not able to work. Many of them lost limbs in the Great War. Many of them were blind from the gas attacks in World War I, and they were tortured. And when these veterans confronted their tormentors and mentioned that we were in the Great War, how can you do it against us? Where were you? You are a 20-year-old Nazi thug. How can you treat us like this? They got even more beatings because they were accused that they fought well because they wanted to buy Aryan status or German status with this. Well, I think I don't need to comment this heartless, cruel Nazi response. History judges everything. So they suffered even more, and also because many of them were still able-bodied, they could do some labor, but those who had small children, they witnessed that their children were sent to gas chambers, that their children were killed, like Otto Frank's daughters. Otto Frank himself was a German lieutenant, a decorated German Jewish soldier, but his children did not survive. So you can just imagine what did they feel as former German Jewish soldiers, as Jewish people, and as fathers going through this. And of course, they were in an age that most of their parents were already too old for forced labor, so they were also gassed. So can you just imagine what it was for a Jewish war veteran to lose their children, being humiliated, beaten, tortured, and losing their parents? Terrible. And but in 1944, when the Nazis just completely wanted to kill every Jew as quick as possible, many of these veterans were also killed in Auschwitz, like I mentioned, Boroshmor and a number of Jewish veterans in my family too. And this is one of the most heartbreaking photos I came across during my research, because we can see two Hungarian children here. They are wearing patriotic military Hungarian field caps from the World War I. And this was a common practice that fathers would place parts of the uniform on the children because they were hoping that their lives would be at least spared, or that they wouldn't be killed or wouldn't be tortured. It didn't help. And it did not help when they brought their military medals and when they confronted the guards in concentration camps. They got even more tortures. And what we know about this photo is that it's from the Auschwitz album, public domain, that these two boys, they died. And we definitely know that they came from a patriotic Hungarian family. We know that their male relatives all fought in the Great War. Surviving hate. How is it possible to survive such hate? Just like Bertold Gutmann's story, who was killed in Auschwitz as well in 1944. He was a pilot in the German Air Force on the left. He knew Hermann Göring, who initially promised to help him, but we know the Nazi promises, Nazi lies, it did not happen, and he was killed. And Heinrich Stern, who I mentioned earlier, the brother of Richard Stern, he was also killed. There was a report with us on this very important topic on the German Jews and the Austro-Hungarian Jews in the World War I. I would like to show colorized segments, colorized reels from our movie, which we did. Before I share the screen, I just would love to recommend two books. One is this one, Doorway to Heroism, written by Rabbi Jack Romberg, about Richard Stern. So Richard Stern, who did this protest in Germany, in Cologne, he was able to escape and he joined the American army, and he won the Silver Star for gallantry. So this is such an amazing story, winning the Iron Cross as a German Jewish soldier and then winning the Silver Star. So I really recommend the book. And this one is Comrades Betrayed, which gives a really good overview of the German Jews of the Great War and the later story. And here is just the prayer book from 1915, which I mentioned. And again, just to show how the Jews were patriotic, again, they wanted to serve Austria well, they wanted to serve Hungary well, and they wanted to be proud Jews together. This book, the prayers are in German language, Hungarian language, and the Hebrew language. It's really terrible, the tortures they had to go through later. But now let's see some parts of the movie. I will share my screen. And let's see if I can just. Let me just try again. Yeah, I believe you can see it. This is our own colorization, German soldiers firing as part of a military exercise in the Great War. We have got more. For example, this one, a German soldier being evacuated from the Great War, again, colorized and restored. And we also colorized Holocaust survivors. I believe you can see it. Really, really tragic. It was really an enormous work, because we had to work frame by frame and watching these dramatic footages. So a little bit about the film, if the presentation made you interested. Let's just share the screen again. So it will be a colorized documentary film about 43 minutes long, and we are still producing the trailer, but I hope the show reels made you interested in this presentation. If you would love to visit, we have got a website, jewishdocumentaries.info, and if you liked it and if you would love to help with this project, you can donate. We have got 501c3 non-profit status, so donations are tax deductible. And here you can see the movie poster, which the film is stabbed in the back. It just shows, it just really summarizes the topic of this film. Yes, thank you very much for attending, and I hope that you will find the information useful. If you want to reach out, just visit the website and you will find contact information and you can send emails. let's see, questions and answers. So where did we find sources? Yes. So first of all, we work with top academics and professors such as Dr. Gary Zola of the American Jewish Archives, or Dr. Michael A. Meyer from the Hebrew Union College, or Dr. Michael Geheran from the West Point Academy. But we were also doing a lot on our own. We had researched regimental books, which I mentioned in the presentation, which were written just after the World War I. But we also use genealogy measurements. I'm a genealogist as well. So we picked up people who we know that they were Jews, and we went to research them. We went to research their military records in various archives, in online archives. We went through casualty lists, and also we followed up the fate of these soldiers in Holocaust records. We visited the Yad Vashem records, the United States Memorial and Holocaust Museum as well. So we compared the data, the birth place, the birthday, the names, the relatives. It was a research of two years. I hope the question was answered and I am recorded, because I did not click on the answer live. Yeah, okay. I think that I answered the question then. Thank you, Jennifer.
We're coming up on the end. Are there any last questions?
So the next project is promoting this one, actually. Most of it is ready, but we would love to educate people about this forgotten topic. So we would love to reach out to more universities, to film festivals, and we want that that people all over the world would learn about this heroic and tragic story of the Jewish soldiers of the Great War. And after that, we were thinking to make a film on Jewish Olympic champions in the 1920s and 1930s, because they also contradicted the Nazi stereotypes. And also we were thinking to make a film on the Jewish Brigade in the World War II.
Wow. Looking forward to all of that.
Thank you very much.
Oh, we got one more question here.
Yeah, were Jews very involved in the Franco-Prussian War? Yes, they were. They were also involved in logistics, in the economics, and also on the battlefield. So the records I found are writing about 30,000 Jewish soldiers of the Prussian army, considering that, yeah, Prussia was the major part, but still a huge number. And also considering that it was not a world war at that time. So definitely the Jews were active in the Franco-Prussian War. And there are a number of postcards, actually, not just the one I picked up in the presentation. I have come across when I was researching in the German Jewish Museum in Berlin and Jewish Museum in Vienna in Austria. I picked up a number of similar memorial postcards where there are Jewish soldiers of the Prussian army, and there were also photos, not just paintings. So yeah, they definitely fought in great numbers. Yeah, in Bavaria as well, and also, you know, in general, where Jews were living. They were volunteering in equal numbers. It's very interesting, actually, to answer this question, because the Jews, so all of the Jews were volunteering. The Zionists were volunteering because they wanted to fight the Russians because of anti-Semitism. The secular Jews were volunteering because they wanted to show that they are German patriots. And the Orthodox Jews, even Orthodox Jews, we have photographs of Orthodox Jews they were volunteering as well, and they were fighting well because they just didn't want to seem covered. They wanted to show their loyalty too. While the German society was more divided, actually, the workers, the artisans, and the farmers. Actually, the German farmers did not really want to volunteer and did not support the war because that would mean that they would need to leave the farms behind. But as for the Jews, everywhere where they lived, in big communities, they were joining the German army.
Well, thank you.
Interesting topic. Yeah, that's so many contributions. It affected more the Jews in France. I discussed this actually with Rabbi Lane Sussman from Philadelphia. He wanted to include this story into the documentary, but it did not affect the German Jews that much. So that's why we did not include it. It was to some extent, yeah, but it wasn't a major incident or a major thing for the German Jews.
Well, I hate to end the conversation, but we're about out of time, and I think the next group coming in or wanting to. Peter, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us and to present. This was fascinating.
You're very welcome. I hope you enjoyed it. It is really a huge topic, and I could just speak even more how some of the veterans chose a different faith. Some veterans became founders of the Haganah. Those who were able to escape on time, but really there need to be one more presentation where we can discuss the details. But yeah, I believe that this program gave a general overview. What was it to be a German Jew in World War I, and what atrocities they had to suffer to survive hate, or as we know, many did not survive it. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I was really happy to take part in this program.
Well, thank you, and I'll be in touch when I have the video ready, and you can take a look at it. And yeah, thank you everybody for coming out.
Thank you. Bye bye.